before I really start the conversation. I was boots on the ground, basically. One of the first, I think I was probably the first American journalist. I am not tooting my horn, but I'm on here to talk to you guys about what I know because I've been talking to a lot of people who responded, who have kids in the classroom, or in the school rather, and I sat down with the grandfather of the gunman for over an hour. So I wanted to take some time to have a full-on conversation because all of these details are a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there, and obviously information continues to pour in daily. Some of that information has been retracted by law enforcement. Some of it has been confusing to a lot of you. So I wanted to give us all an opportunity to kind of have a conversation about what I've learned, what I believe to be true based on what I have learned. And there are some things that I won't be confirming based on the fluidity of the situation. But it is a very active investigation. There are a lot of children. Of course, we know the worst, the tragedy of the 19 children that were lost and the 2 teachers and just the residual impacts here of this community. And you'll have to bear with me a little bit because my voice is completely annihilated over the last couple of days. They've been long days, but not nearly as long as what I know these parents and these community members have been feeling and dealing with. So I should start really by saying my heart breaks for Uvalde. It's an amazing community. Obviously, the only thing you guys know about Uvalde is what happened here. But I have been covering our southern border for about 9 months, since August. And Uvalde is one of those communities that I've been covering. And I have people here that I've been working with, sources here that I've been working with. And so it is one of those situations where just my heart breaks for these people on a much deeper level than just covering this as a journalist. So what I can ask of you guys is prayers for these wonderful people because they truly are wonderful. This truly is a tight-knit community. I know you've heard that. It's a quiet community. It's a lovely community. You guys have all heard those things. But it's also a border community. And these people are tough. These people have been through some stuff. And they don't want this to define them. They don't want this to be why you guys know about Uvalde. You know, and every county and every community is pretty far away in Texas. Texas is big. So even if, you know, you're not from Uvalde and you're 2 hours away, you probably know people in Uvalde and you probably care about the people here. So, and when I say these people have been through a lot, what's really interesting is the initial emails that went out to parents. The parents actually thought that it was another bailout pursuit because in this community, they have had an influx of illegal immigration. And with that, they have had an influx in human smuggling and drug smuggling pursuits that end up in their backyards, pursuits that end up through their fences. So one of the mothers of the wife of one of my sources, she sent me the email response, the alerts that came out, and I asked her if she believed that it was like what she thought it was, and she said she thought it was just another pursuit. She said that they go on lockdown pretty often because of these situations. When there's a pursuit and there's a chase, what I'm saying when there's a pursuit is police, DPS, Border Patrol will engage with a suspicious vehicle, whether it's stolen, whether they're driving erratically or whatever it might be, or they got tipped off. And what happens is a lot of times those people don't stop. They try to evade law enforcement. And so, and that was actually the initial kind of report, was that it was a pursuit. And so what happens is these police all engage, usually ends up in a crash because that's just what happens. And then what happens after that is they bail out. So you had this crash, you had this man crash this truck, and then he bailed out, right? That was the initial report. That's what happened, but it was not a pursuit and it was not a bailout. He did run from the scene and then ended up on the school grounds, and we'll go into kind of the timeline and the details there as well. But it was about 20 minutes later that they learned that there was an active shooter. So the school was put on lockdown. She said about 20 minutes later they got the alert that there was indeed an active shooter at their school. Now, this is a family who has a third grader in that school. The third grader and I talked. I actually went over to their house, not to talk with them, to just hug the mom and my source's wife, because my source was out of town. And I just wanted to be there for her because I can't imagine what she went through. They couldn't find their son at first. And that was one of the hardest text messages I think I've ever received from a friend, someone I call a friend, my source, who I've been working with for months. Where I said, we don't know where he is. And I said, I'll go help you find him. And I was already on the way because I was supposed to be covering something else. So they found him by the grace of God, but it was moments later that she had to go get her other child out of junior high, who is 15 years old. And she said they were sitting on the bench waiting, and that school was also on lockdown and was allegedly receiving threats as well. The nearby schools were receiving threats. And she explained and described to me when her son called from the junior high whispering from the classroom because they were all hiding, because they were so scared. And again, it's by the grace of God that they're all together. The husband is back home. They're all reunited. And I was there again last night and was just talking with them. And I just can't imagine. I can't imagine what that felt like for those parents, especially the parents that didn't get to bring their little ones home. I don't know. But when I got to the house, just to hug the mom and just to sit with her, the little boy started telling me everything, and I said, do you want to tell me your story? And he said, I don't know. And he goes, is it going to be live? And I said, no, it's recorded, and you don't have to do it. It's okay, you don't have to do it. And the mom told him, if you want to, you can. And he goes, yeah, I'll do it. And he didn't want his face on, so I didn't film his face. But he explained the scene because he was outside. He says they were out at recess. And he said he watched the gunman in between cars firing shots. And he said that at that point he knew that he was serious about hurting people. And I asked him if he knew what to do, and he said not really. He said that they weren't really that versed on active shooter. He said that they knew just to get under the desks. But basically, after that, we all know that the gunman accessed the school. There's a lot of timeline that's kind of convoluted right now. Obviously, DPS is working through details and is trying to figure out what this exact timeline is and when the school, when the police actually engaged the shooter and when they went into the school. So what I can tell you from one of my sources who I've worked with for a long, long time, he was on the responding team, and I don't know, I'm not going to talk about what he told me, about what he saw, but I'll tell you about what they did. So, he tells me that they went into the school. He tells me that the city police were outside because it was a state and federal response at that time. They had DPS and Border Patrol inside, so the city police stayed outside. He said that they didn't need more police inside because they were so filled with police as it was, and they were taking fire from the gunman inside of that room. And that is one of the reasons why they weren't able to get into that room. He was barricaded in a classroom, and apparently there were two classrooms conjoined, kind of like a hotel situation, like a bathroom in the middle. So there were two rooms. Another teacher was also hurt, but she was pulled from that room. We know we lost two teachers in this incident. But he said at that time, they went outside, they decided that they needed to get children out. And so it was his idea to go around and to break the glass in these classrooms from the outside and start evacuating children and teachers from the school. He said when they started breaking the glass, the kids were all screaming because they were really scared, obviously, because they thought there was another threat and that they were going to be hurt. And so he reassured them, we're police, you're safe, we're the cops, we're police, we're going to get you to safety. And so they pulled them to safety. They pulled the teacher who was shot in the stomach area out of the window as well. And he showed me, I met up with him after the vigil. He was not there, but he came and saw me. And he had cuts all over his arms from pulling people out of the glass broken window. He showed me his baton that was covered in glass shards from breaking the windows. He said that there was blood all over his boots, and just described the scene to me. And right now I'm really grateful for the federal side of things, that number one, they were there to respond so quickly, but the services they're offering their responders. He is safe right now. He is dealing with a lot. This is a community that's extremely close to him, and I don't want to give more details because he's a protected source of mine, but just pray for them, pray for the families, please. So again, they were pulling people from the outside. He said they needed the city police to be outside because they didn't know if there was an additional threat. And I was there and saw that there was, in fact, an additional threat. I was I think the first American journalist on scene. There was Univision, I believe, was there, and Spanish Reuters, I believe, was there. But when I got there, the perimeter wasn't pushed back yet. It was so when I got there were police everywhere, obviously, and I was looking for the public information officer, but no one could tell me anything. No one could confirm if people were alive or if we had lost anybody. And so then I walked up to the funeral home, which is right across the street from where this happened, and it's where they were staging the law enforcement. And so I walked up, and this is all on a live stream on my Facebook as well if you haven't seen it. And obviously things have changed since then, so please keep that in mind when you're criticizing my coverage. So I walked up and was greeted, by law enforcement and DPS, and one of the gentlemen I talked with still had blood all over his shirt and on him. And they pushed me back a little bit, and then they pushed me back further, drew the caution tape further, and then pushed me back again even further. But I saw the vehicle, the truck was right in front of me. Everything was happening right in front of me. Saw the helicopters leave. But at this point that I had arrived, it was believed that the gunman was already dead. In my report, he was believed to be in custody. That was the initial report. But it's confirmed that he was dead at that time. So from there, I was standing at the caution tape, and probably 20 officers started rushing towards me. I mean, mobilizing. And I just kept saying, what's going on? What's going on? And I mean, my heart was already as low as it could go, right? And then all of a sudden I heard there's a shooting at the high school. Which, thank God, it was a false alarm. But that mobilized a lot of people, but the response to the shooting was already, it appeared at that juncture, based on the timeline, the gunman was dead. However, they still didn't know they were getting these threats. They didn't know if there was going to be more violence at that school, at the nearby schools. And so from there, things kind of continue to transpire. But now it's the questions, right? It's the questions about who the shooter was. I actually haven't said his name once. I don't even want to. So the 18-year-old gunman, he, and I should say this is from the grandfather. This is not from what I've seen in reports. This is not from DPS, even a press conference. This is from the grandfather of the shooter, the husband of the woman shot in the face before this gunman went to the elementary school. Now I should also explain they are not husband and wife by ceremony. They are a common law marriage. The husband tells me that Roland tells me. Sally or Celia is what he called her. Calls her. She's alive. He explained that she was shot here in the cheek. I believe it was one of the sides of her face, here in the cheek, and went out through her ear. I asked if she was communicating. He said she wasn't talking yet, but she was writing and communicating to the daughter at the hospital. The daughter being the shooter's mother. So what happened there from the grandfather was that about an hour or two, he said, prior to the elementary school tragedy, he had a conversation with his grandmother, rather she had a conversation with him about removing him from their phone plan. And I asked why that would be a big issue. And he said he was always on his phone. He didn't have friends. He didn't leave the house. He had one friend he used to talk to but doesn't anymore. He didn't do anything. He quit his job about a month ago at Wendy's. And so his phone was kind of his lifeline, right? And he said he wasn't ready to get off the plan. I asked why he wasn't ready. And his grandpa said he didn't know. I said, well, did he have money? And he said, yeah. And I asked how. And he said, well, he worked at Wendy's. And then about a week after he quit his job at Wendy's, so about 3 weeks ago, he started asking his grandfather to pick up shifts with him. His grandfather owns an HVAC, so an HVAC kind of air conditioning unit business. And he would take him on jobs with him around Uvalde, around the neighboring communities up to San Antonio. And I asked him how much he paid him. He said he paid him about $75 a job when he would go. And so he had a little bit of money there. Now the other thing, the grandfather said he was missing some tools, some equipment. I asked about how much was that worth. He said about $500. So I asked him though, could he have stolen those things and sold them? And he was adamant that he could not have. But here is the thing. He was adamant that he couldn't have done this either. And so could that have been part of the money? People are asking, did he have siblings? Where are the parents? I have all those details. I will get to that. Right now, we're going to go down this timeline. So the grandmother shot in the face. Apparently what the grandfather said was she had fallen back at some point in the home because there was what he described as a pool of blood when he brought me inside of the home. He invited me in, and the reason I was there is because people here know me because of my coverage, and they trust me. And so a really, really wonderful human being who knows Roland set it up, and he trusted me to be there. So that is why I was there in the first place, and why I was inside. As soon as I arrived, he asked me, who are you? And I told him, who I was, and he said, come in. And he showed me everything. Blood splatters on the wall. And he was cleaning it up. He was cleaning up his wife's blood. And from there, apparently his wife went outside. She had a towel against her face, I guess. Went outside. The neighbors saw her, called for help, then called Roland, and he rushed over. And that's when the ambulances came and got her out of there. So it was at this time, excuse me, I missed the part where after the conversation about the phone plan, and I said, was it an argument? He said, no, it was not an argument. It was a conversation. He said he does not know why he would have done this to his grandmother. She took care of him. She loved him. He loved her. He does not know what happened. But there, after that conversation, Roland left. He had to go to work. He was going to work. And so there was a time frame there, an hour or two, he said, when he wasn't there. when he shot her and then went to the elementary school, according to him. So after the ambulances came, obviously she went to the hospital. Now, after he shot his grandmother, he went to the school, which is a couple of blocks away. His grandfather said it was his truck that he was driving, his as in the grandfather's truck, his work truck that he was driving. He did not have a license. He did not know how he did not know how to drive. Excuse me. I asked him why he didn't teach him how to drive. He said he needed to show progress. You know, he needed to show that he was doing something with his life. And I said, was he not doing that? And he said he was just laying in bed and he quit his job. So he didn't feel compelled to help him in that way, to teach him how to drive. So that we don't know why he crashed, but that could have been part of it. Neighbors report that they heard the engine revving really loudly because, again, he didn't know how to drive. So after that, he crashed the vehicle, and eyewitnesses, now we're switching the scene a little bit, eyewitnesses now tell me 2 different ones, different houses. I did not interview them next to each other. They were an hour apart. The exact same story. This blackish, dark gray black truck barreled through this neighborhood, down this road, crashed into the drainage ditch area. That's right there. He got out of the vehicle, and as he was getting out of the vehicle, the people from the funeral home right next door were rushing over to see if he was okay. Because it was a crash, right? They didn't know what was going on. That's when the gunfire actually started, was when the funeral director or home employees engaged him. I do not know if they were injured. I'm working to get those details, but I don't believe so. From there, he ran through the field, about a football field length probably, and jumped over the fence. Now that goes to the piece where that 3rd grader was telling me he was walking through the parking lot and firing shots. So from there, and again, this 3rd grader tells me they were at recess. The first dispatch call was around 11:40 a.m. And so he says they were not inside the building at the time. I do not know if 4th graders had a different recess period than 3rd graders. I'm working to get some more details from the school today as well. So those timeline things, hopefully we can get together. But I explained kind of the outside situation, what happened, and how they were taking fire. Eventually they were able to break through that barricade and get in, and it was a BORTAC agent, which is actually a Border Patrol kind of SWAT team arm. No, he wasn't from North Dakota. The grandfather has lived here his whole life, except for living in Chicago for a couple of years. Someone just asked that question. But so a BORTAC agent was actually the one who was able to take down that gunman. And so obviously from there, the scene was still active, but they didn't know if there were more shooters, more people involved, or what was going on. Of course, I just told you about the mobilization to the threat. So let's go into what the grandfather told me about the shooter. 18 years old, just turned 18, I believe, on May 16th. Bought the guns on, he says, the Sunday before the shooting. Now that is something he didn't really know clearly. He was kind of murky on that. He said he did not know he had the guns. So the grandfather actually spent time in prison around 30 years ago, he said, for 13 years for drug trafficking charges. So he says he cannot have guns in the house, or else he'll go back to prison for 15 to 20 years. He said he hates guns. He does not want them around him. He despises guns, is what he said. The other piece here that's going underreported is Roland's daughter, the mother of the shooter. They actually had bought a house for her to live in nearby. So she was actually living in a house nearby with the grandson and for some time. So I asked him if the guns could have possibly been there, if they could have been hidden in the yard, if he just didn't know, and he said that's a possibility. And so the rules for the house, for the daughter, according to the grandfather, were that she could not have men in the house. Well, a man about a year ago started showing up at that house, was allegedly helping fix the house, started living there. The grandfather said drugs started going through that house. There was a drug problem between the mother and this boyfriend who apparently was much older than her. And then about February or March is when Roland says that the grandson started periodically living there, living with him, staying on his floor. So he said he would kind of come for a week and then go back and come and stay. It was periodic living with his grandparents. But again, he didn't even have a bedroom. The grandmother had a bedroom. The grandfather had a bedroom. They did not share a room. The grandson slept on the floor. He showed me where he slept with multiple blankets. But again, he said he didn't ever leave, didn't do anything. He was always home whenever the grandfather got home from work. He said as soon as the grandfather would leave for work, he would tell his grandson to go into his bedroom, that he could be in the bedroom. And so, gosh, I asked him a lot of questions, so I'll try to get through everything. I asked him if he was quiet, if he was bullied in school, if he knew anything about that. And he said no, and I asked him if he got progressively quiet over the last year or so, and he said no, he was always quiet. Now, the grandson dropped out of school a year ago. An eyewitness and someone who went to school with him corroborated that the first day I was on scene, that he had PE with him, and he was really quiet. He didn't ever display any kinds of indications that he would be capable of doing something like this. And then he said he had not seen him at school since then. That was 2 years ago, but we know now that he dropped out a year ago, was set to graduate this year. I asked the grandfather if, him not graduating maybe had something to do with it. He said he didn't know. So, okay, what else is on the brain right now from in that perspective? So I asked him if he had a girlfriend. He said no. We do know that he was communicating with someone who, said that she had no part in it, did not know anything was going on, or that he was going to do what he did. So that's that situation right there. But then I asked him if the grandfather knew people in that community. He said yes. Again, he grew up here. He lived here basically all his life. He lived in Chicago for a little bit, but he went to Robb Elementary, just like a lot of people in this community. So the grandfather went to the same school as this tragedy. And he doesn't know how to move forward. He doesn't know how to reach out to people because he knows that people are blaming him. But the mother was there. She was living in a house nearby. The grandfather and the grandmother were trying to do their best. When I talked to him, he said that it had just hit him that day, what had happened. It was a full day after. And he said that he hadn't eaten, he hadn't slept, he did not change his clothes, he did not take his blood pressure medication. He was fully in shock with the entire situation. Something else, though, that I think is really important to understand is Texas culture, Texas men, a lot of men in our country in smaller communities, emotion isn't really right there, right? It's not open all the time, and you sure aren't talking about mental health if that's the case. It's more, how's the weather? Why'd you quit your job kind of conversations. And that's, he didn't know a lot. Now the grandfather tells me that the shooter does have a sibling, a sister, and she's 2 years older, and she serves in the armed forces. She's in our military. So we have one sibling who signed up to save lives, and one who was taking them, raised in the same house. He said that she is devastated because she can't even wrap her head around what happened, but it's still her brother. So there's a lot of grief in that family as well, and just unfathomable pain. Not, and I don't even know for those families, because they know these families as well. The grandfather says, I know these grandparents. They're my friends. And he doesn't know, the sister must have been involved. That's sad that someone's saying that. Don't say that. That's some speculation, and that's how things So she wasn't even in the state when this happened, okay? So we need to keep speculation down. We're going with what we know, okay? Thank you. So one of the reasons that the response was so quick, if you guys haven't been following my coverage, I was down here because I've been covering the southern border crisis for the last 9 months. So was Border Patrol and DPS. The amount of people that were here on the law enforcement side were here because of the crisis that's been going on. Because of, I hope you guys can hear me. Sorry if it's windy. Because of the crisis that's going on here, the bailouts, the daily bailouts, you know, those kinds of things are why this response was here. And that was, you know, someone saying that the response was insanely slow. You know, dispatch calls went out at 11:40. They were mobilized, you know, within minutes. Now people are saying the response was incredibly slow because they weren't inside of that room at that time. I get that. There's that hour-long time frame, but they were in the building. The response wasn't slow. It was them getting the gunman down. That was slow. That's the difference there. People are asking how he was able to acquire a gun if he didn't have a license. Well, he worked a job, so he had social security card. He had, you know, some kind of identification to work. So that is definitely what is going on. I don't disagree that an hour was too long. I'm just telling you what I know. I don't put my opinions in there, okay? So I don't know. I'm working to find more details from the person that I know that responded, and I'm trying to respect him as well, to not cause further pain and trauma for him. And so I'm kind of allowing him to share details with me that he's comfortable with. So, you know, ask questions that you have when, you know, in this situation, so I can kind of try to discuss that with you. Lots of people are employed without the correct documentation. I mean, possibly. That's possible. I don't know. But the thing is, you know, he did go to school here. This is his community. He likely had some kind of ID. He's in the system here somewhere, you know. So that's what I know about that. Now, obviously, you know, these communities around here are stepping up. They are donating. You know, if you're going to donate and you want to help, please do your due diligence. I'll do my best as well to make sure that, you know, that the money is going to the right places. So someone's asking, was the school door unlocked? Well, if they were at recess, like my third grade source witness tells me, then that could have been that discrepancy on why that door was unlocked. That is a possibility. There's, I believe, 5 elementary schools in the district. I think only 2 or 3, maybe 2 in Uvalde proper. But in the district, I mean, it covers a lot of area. And right now, you know, you're saying you want the police to give more information. And, you know, I guarantee they would love to give more information. But they also don't want to be wrong because there are so many people grieving right now. And so that's a tough space. These are little ones, right? These are little angels. And they need to be right. They need to be correct. Yeah, you know, it seems weird that side door was unlocked. I'm working to get information on why that happened. But again, if they were at recess, these kids were able to come and go. You know, that's how it is during those time periods. I don't know if it was timed like that, if he had targeted the elementary school. Governor Abbott had said that he did, and then the director of DPS said that it wasn't necessarily an elementary school. My eyewitnesses say they didn't believe he was targeting that school, more like he crashed right there and then ran into the school. So there's a lot of unanswered things. But when it comes to the shooter, the shooter, you know, the grandfather said he didn't know, and he should have maybe, you know, he should have maybe paid more attention. He should have maybe seen something, and he feels terrible for not, you know, understanding that maybe there was something going on. And he blatantly said maybe he should have talked to somebody. you know, and so he discussed the mental health aspect on it. Um, Someone's asking if he was here as a U.S. citizen. As I mentioned, the grandfather grew up here, has lived here. This family is from here. So this has nothing to do with immigration at all. So I'm trying to, let's see. How do I get there we go. So online he did say that he had shot his grandmother, or was going to shoot his grandmother, and then shot his grandmother, and then did say something about shooting at a school. The discrepancy is whether he said if he was going to shoot at the elementary school or just at a school in general. So that is what I'm not reporting on either of those things yet, because I don't know. And I don't know if he knew the side door was unlocked. Again, this young boy, this 9-year-old, said that he was walking in the parking lot. So maybe he went to several doors. I don't know. That is something that's still unclear at this time as well. Wasn't the man his grandmother's? So the grandfather was the common law husband to the grandmother of the gunman. So, okay, what else is happening in my brain that I know that has not been reported? You know, Roland, the grandfather, is a Christian man. I asked him if he believed that the gunman was a Christian, was a man of faith. And he said, probably not. Probably not, because of what he did. You know, I mean, I think that was a realization for him that, you know, that put things a little bit into more reality. So that was pretty tough. Again, you know, people are talking about the police outside of the door. I don't know what was actually going on, what was really the chaos inside of that school. But I do know, again, that they were taking gunfire, that there were several people that were shot and hurt. So those are some of the facts that I know right now. If you have questions, please reach out to me. I'll be updating and going live as often as possible. The problem is the service is so terrible in Uvalde. Right now I'm in Del Rio and heading back to Uvalde. And again, I mean, it's a situation that needs the utmost coverage and the utmost respect. And I've had a lot of news networks trying to get me to talk to families, and I'm refusing. I am not going to people's homes. And I am not going to reach out to these families. So please don't ask me to do that. If these families want to talk to me, they can talk to me. But I'm not going to do that. Another thing I know from the scene, because people are talking about guns right now, and it just kind of clicked on. He had his rifle with him. He also had a pistol, something like that, with him, a Glock, apparently, a tan-colored gun that my source tells me he found on the ground when he went in there. And there was also a bag of fully loaded magazines outside of the school. And that apparently was left behind. I don't know if it's because he saw law enforcement outside or what it was. You know, I've gotten some backlash about the little boy talking. And again, I didn't go there to talk to him. I went there to hug them. And he wanted to share with me. And he said that he didn't think he was going to survive, and he does not want to go back to that school. He's supposed to be in 4th grade next year. And I went back there that night. I think I got there around 11:30. It was right before the massive hailstorm. And I left my phone off. And I just sat with them. We watched The Notebook. And we watched The Longest Ride or something like that. And I brought this little rescue dog in that I've been carrying around, that I actually acquired in Eagle Pass because he was abandoned by migrants that had come over because they can't take him with them. And it was 116 degrees that day. And so I took this little pup, and so he's kind of been my therapy animal. So I thought maybe they could use a little love and a little laugh. So I brought Chico in the house, and we just sat there, and the boys told me about their school and how they love history, and how they wanted to, one of them wants to go to Germany, and just talking to me about all these things. And again, the dad was gone. He was gone working out of town, and he learned about it from the air and just was in shock. And so I sat with that family for till about 3:30 in the morning, and drove back to Del Rio, and then got back up at 6 a.m. and went back to Uvalde. And it really bothers me that I was so busy, not yesterday, but the day before, that I wasn't able to go back there. But her parents had drove in, and so I knew that she was okay. And then last night I went back there again, and the husband was home, and I got to hug them all. And that was such a blessing. They're all back together. But they hadn't even changed their clothes because of it. They must be just going through so much. And I just keep bugging her and telling her, I will run errands for you. I will do anything you want. Another thing I want you guys to know is this. After I sat with the gunman's grandfather for an hour, I asked him if we could stay and pray with him. I have a friend with me that came in to help me because I am by myself. And we stood in a circle holding hands, crying and praying. And he prayed for me, and I prayed for him. And we prayed for these families. And that's what I ask for you guys to do as well. Just pray for healing for these amazing people. I don't know what it's like to be from a community where there was a gunman opening fire in an elementary school. But I do know what it's like to be from a community defined by devastation. I'm from Oso. It's where the biggest landslide in national history took place, and that's my Chinese community. So I know these people. I know these people in this community are strong because it's in the face of tragedy where they show who they really are. And these people are tough. They're amazing. They're not going to be okay today or tomorrow or next year. They will be. We are all so strong, and they are Uvalde strong. And together we are all Uvalde strong today and always. So my friends, I'm going to get to work. I'm going to compose myself. Thank you for allowing me a space to talk about everything I know. I will talk to you soon. Trying to update Twitter as much as possible. Take care of each other. And pray. Sending you guys my love and praying for your healing and safety as well.